We must move on. Urgent question. Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Minister if he will make a statement on the handling of the cases of the 5 alleged Rwandan genocide perpetrators in the United Kingdom?
Minister Ben Wallace.
Mr. Speaker, none of us can forget the scenes of 25 years ago, the horrendous sight of the Rwandan genocide. And my colleague, the Minister for Africa, visited only this week to share in the international recognition and remembrance of such a horrific event. We can confirm that the Met War Crimes Unit within the Counter-Terrorism Command received a referral from the Rwandan authorities in January 2018 relating to 5 individuals in the United Kingdom and allegations of genocide offences in the Rwanda dating back from around 1994. Relevant documentation to this was assessed by the War Crimes Unit, and officers were also deployed to Rwanda as part of our initial work to scope out the allegations. As a result, we have subsequently commenced an investigation which will initially involve a review of all the documentation transferred from Rwanda. Given the complexities involved, this is expected to be a protracted and lengthy process. Inquiries continue.
Mr. Andrew Mitchell.
Mr. Speaker, as the Minister said, Sunday was the 25th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide. The Honourable Lady for Wirral South and I represented this House, along with the Minister for Africa, at ceremonies in Kigali which were dignified and profoundly moving. This House will recall that nearly 1 million Rwandans were murdered in frenzied killing over a 90-day period, while the international community effectively did nothing to stop it. Once the killing was ended, those responsible, the leaders of the genocide, fled. Over the intervening years, many have returned voluntarily to Rwanda to be processed through the Gacaca court system. Others have been extradited to Rwanda, including from the US, Canada, France, Norway, Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, and Sweden. Britain, sadly, is a glaring exception. Proceedings started here in the UK more than a decade ago in respect of 5 alleged genocide perpetrators. In the British courts, in spite of ruling that there was a prima facie case of genocide made out against all 5, declined to extradite. The British taxpayer has forked out already more than £3 million in legal costs. 4 of these 5 are living on benefits, including on housing benefit. The Rwandan authorities, Mr. Speaker, having failed to secure extradition in Britain in the lower courts, have declined to proceed to the Supreme Court and have asked that the UK undertake their trial here. In spite of all the evidence being available here already in the United Kingdom, the Metropolitan Police have indicated it could take a further 10 years to process. Mr. Speaker, the souls of those murdered in the genocide cry out for justice. But from Britain, justice has at the least been delayed and at worst denied. Mr. Speaker, the Nuremberg trials commenced a mere 7 months after the end of the war and were concluded within 10 months. In the interests of those facing these dreadful allegations, as well as for the reputation of British justice, we should surely expect these 5 alleged genocidaires to be on trial at the Old Bailey by the end of this year. I end, Mr. Speaker, with the words this last weekend of the distinguished Rwandan Minister of Justice and Attorney General, Mr. Johnson Busingye, who, when he came here to Britain, the Director of Public Prosecutions could not even find the time to see him. And he said this at the weekend, and I quote, "Anyone who cares about British values and justice should be ashamed. The UK will go down in history as the only country in Europe which knowingly shielded alleged Rwandan genocidaires from justice."
Minister Ben Wallace.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend is a strong supporter of Rwanda and knows the country incredibly well. And I do respect many of his views on the country and the need for action. I have to say I fundamentally disagree, however, with his last point. The United Kingdom has not shielded these people. He will know that the High Court in 2017, on the 28th of July, the court ruled they could not be extradited for fear of not facing a fair trial. he will know and respect the difference between the government, the police, and the judiciary, and that we have to follow that rule of law as found, as they ruled. This government, as previous governments, have been committed to bringing people to trial, which is why he himself has raised. We have spent £3 million in trying to get the right outcome. However, when the court ruled that these individuals could not be extradited, the United Kingdom, under its obligations to the Genocide Convention, and after a request by the Rwandan government, took on the investigation itself, went out to meet and gather evidence in Rwanda, meet officials in there, and there is a live police investigation into a number of individuals for potential war crimes. My right honourable friend will also understand that as it is a live police investigation, there is no more I can say on this particular matter for fear of either prejudicing a fair trial here or anything else, and that is where we have to live. That is the facts we find before us. The government is not shielding any war criminals, nor should it, and we would not. We are doing our best. The counter-terrorism police, I have raised the issue with them. They say that of the investigations they are involved in, the timescale is not 10 years, more like between 3 to 5 years. I can assure my right honourable friend, however, of one thing, that if the police require more resource or they come up against either an obstacle related to international relations, the government stands by to help, to expedite and to make sure those suspected of war crimes face full justice. But there is absolutely no case that this government, nor any previous government, has shielded them from the war crimes trials that they may face.
Nick Thomas Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for Sutton Coldfield for applying for this urgent question on such an important matter, and to you for granting it. The Rwandan genocide, which took place in 1994, with its recent 25-year anniversary, a haunting reminder of what happened. It was an atrocious act of violence, with hundreds of thousands of people being killed in just 100 days. And that such a heinous act took place whilst the world stood by is a stain on the international community. Mr. Speaker, allegations have been made against 5 individuals whose extradition to Rwanda was not granted by the High Court in 2017, and I will not, Mr. Speaker, comment specifically on the individuals themselves. It has, however, been reported over the last couple of days that Scotland Yard had received a referral from the Rwandan authorities in January 2018, with Scotland Yard officers sent to help with the investigation regarding those individuals, as has been confirmed by the Minister today. Mr. Speaker, it is right that these allegations be investigated in this country. We believe in a rules-based international order, and if that is to mean anything, it must mean that a crime against humanity is a crime against us all, no matter where it takes place in the world. All efforts must be made to pursue justice for victims. Therefore, whilst the Minister must quite rightly be circumspect about what he can say with an ongoing investigation, can he reassure this House that all necessary resources will be put at the disposal of the investigation, that all possible efforts to gather evidence will be made, and whilst it will of course be complex, that this investigation is carried out carefully and as speedily as it possibly can be?
I can give the honourable gentleman that reassurance, and even at the beginning of this year I got an update from the counter-terrorism police about the conduct of any investigations relating to people from Rwanda. I in fact briefed the Right Honourable Member for Sutton Coldfield on that about that same time, to make sure that he realises that we are not forgetting this. We're not going to forget the genocide, and nor are we going to forget bringing to justice those people. I am very happy to keep the House posted, as we are allowed to, but nevertheless, with the respect we have to remember, this is a live police investigation, and therefore all the safeguards apply.
Mr. David Davis.
Speaker. Other countries with very strong records of protecting asylum and protecting the rights of individuals under criminal investigation, like Canada, Norway, Denmark, Sweden and the Netherlands, have all seen fit to extradite suspects in their countries back to Rwanda. Why are we not?
If my right honourable friend has a problem with the judiciary, I suspect he takes that up with the Lord Chief Justice. It is the ruling of the High Court that we have to respect in July of that year that made a view that they would not stand a fair trial if extradited. We fought the case, we took it to the court decided otherwise, and we have to respect that ruling.
Patrick Brady.
Speaker, congratulate the member for Sutton Coldfield on securing the question and you for granting it, Mr. Speaker, as the 100 days of commemoration of the 25th anniversary begin. I was part of the CPA delegation last year, I think the first ever CPA delegation to Rwanda, and saw at first hand the efforts that are being made to achieve justice and build peace. But the question of alleged perpetrators remaining overseas does leave a cloud hanging over those attempts, and it's not fair either on those who are accused to be left with these accusations left untested, or on the victims. So, first of all, to build on some of the questions that have been asked, accepting the role of the judiciary here, etc., what discussions have been had with other countries about why they felt able to allow for extraditions and that wasn't felt here? But if the justice system here has concluded that a fair trial cannot be conducted in Rwanda, a way has to be found to achieve justice here. So is he confident that the Met Police have enough resources to complete their inquiries? What timescale is planned once the inquiries are concluded for the next steps? And can he give us assurances that that will move as quickly as possible, not so that justice is both done and seen to be done?
Minister.
I can assure the honourable member, I meet the head of counter-terrorism policing at least once a week, and we discuss a wide range of issues, and if there is an issue around this particular case or other cases of a resource pressure, we will no doubt discuss it and do what we can do to solve the issue. As far as other courts and other countries, they have different statutes books, they have different legislative arrangements. We go by our courts. Our courts have made that ruling. It is regretful. I am frustrated. It's not just in this case. Anyone who is a Home Office minister will often see their decisions or indeed their attempts to extradite sometimes very dangerous people struck down. But that is the rule of law. That is the rules-based system we're in. And whether I like it or not, that's quite right. We follow it.
Mr. Desmond Swain.
With chain gangs labouring in uniforms of magnificent pink as that worn by the honourable member for Redditch, isn't there much that we can learn from the Gacaca court system?
Minister.
Well, I'm not going to comment on another. I am... Somebody else is going to... Look, Mr. Speaker, it's very clear. We have successive governments tried to extradite these people to face justice in Rwanda. The courts took a different view. We then stood up to the plate, or the police, in an operational decision, had to investigate it. I am not a learned gentleman in this House that enables me to compare different legal systems, and nor am I going to attempt to try.
Mr. Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Given the decision of the High Court in 2017, and not asking the Minister to comment on these particular cases, but can he just assure the House that there is no obstacle in principle to anyone who is accused of war crimes, genocide or crimes against humanity being able to face justice here in this country, providing the evidential test is met?
Yeah.
I can give the right honourable member that assurance that when it comes to war crimes, under our obligations of the Convention, there is no barrier at all.
Stephen Crabb.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 12 years ago, I sat in on one of those Gacaca courts and saw some of these genocide suspects being put on trial, and it was a rough and ready process. But does the Minister agree that over the years there's been a huge amount of work done by the international community, including by British lawyers and experts, to help Rwanda improve the quality of its justice system? They've abolished the death penalty. Does he agree with me that there's no problem in principle in extraditing suspects to Rwanda to face trial?
My right honourable friend, look, it is our view, it was the government's view. It's why we contested the case. Unfortunately, it was not the view of the UK courts.
Mr. Stephen Twigg.
Can I plead with the Minister for a greater sense of urgency in this case? The right honourable gentleman, who I congratulate for bringing this urgent question, talked about a 10-year delay. The Minister said no, that was a 3 to 5 year delay. 3 to 5 years is still too long. It is 25 years since the genocide in Rwanda. Can we not have that sense of urgency from the government, please?
Well, the honourable member would have first of all heard my response that, in fact, it wasn't until 2017 that we started the investigation here at the request of the Rwandans. So it hasn't been 20-odd years where we haven't done it. Look, if there is a requirement for all resource, it will be discussed every week with the counter-terrorism police, and I stand by ready to help with that. But he will also want to make sure that when these people, if these people come before a court, that they are convicted and that we do the best case possible to make sure that the crimes that they are charged with are held and stick.
Pauline Latham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've spent time in Rwanda with Project Omubano, but also with the Select Committee. I've met the people whose families have been slaughtered. I've met people who've reconciled themselves to the fact that they no longer have families. They have gone a long way, and I agree with my honourable friend opposite. It is too long. These people have waited 25 years. Maybe we haven't done it for 25 years, but we should have done, and we should have moved this on, and they cannot come to peace until this is reconciled.
I hear my honourable friend, and I understand, not only if you're a victim, but if you're a supporter of that country, that you want this to be closed and justice be administered to those people who were responsible for that genocide. However, a police investigation is a matter for the police. How they conduct it is a matter for them, and how it is prosecuted is a matter for the CPS. We stand by ready to support them in doing that, but at the end of the day, it is operationally independent, and the CPS is independent on many of those issues.
Alison McGovern.
Mr. Speaker, and thank you for granting this urgent question. I congratulate the member for Sutton Coldfield for asking it. As he mentioned, it was very important for us to attend on Sunday the Kwibuka 25 remembrance in Kigali. And Mr. Speaker, I must tell the House that the bravery of those survivors was humbling. Yep. Our duty to them, Mr. Speaker, is therefore to pursue justice, and I know the Minister knows that. So can I ask him a broader question about what conclusions he has drawn about the UK's current ability to act in relation to crimes against humanity, and what discussions he's been having with the Foreign Office and DFID about that. This matters, Mr. Speaker, not just directly on this issue to Rwandans, but also to other victims of grave injustices, such as those from Syria, and not just, Mr. Speaker, to direct victims of these heinous crimes, but to each one of us in this world, all of whom rely on the rule of law.
Minister.
While I recognise the understandable impatience of many colleagues around these particular cases, we shouldn't detract from the fact that the United Kingdom, under successive governments, have been a proud supporter on administering justice on war crimes around the world, both Bosnia, former Yugoslavia, and Rwanda and other places. And that is why, and we should be proud of that. And we have not only put our money where our mouth is often, we have used all diplomatic tools in the past. Former Yugoslavia is a good example, to bring to trial some people that thought they were always out of reach of justice. We continue with that enthusiasm and support. If it is a case of resources, I've said to honourable members, I stand by and the department stands by to continue to support that. We are determined to see justice. There is no resistance on this side of the House from doing so, and we will continue to pursue that to make sure that those people face the justice they deserve.
Jeremy Lefroy.
Mr. Speaker, having been with my honourable friend from Mid Derbyshire on several trips to Rwanda, and also my right honourable friend for Sutton Coldfield, I entirely share the comments they make. But would my right honourable friend, the Minister, agree with me that it's absolutely vital that we prosecute, this case is prosecuted with the utmost vigour, because if the High Court judgment in 2017 leads people to think that the UK is a soft touch, that will mean that we end up by having people who commit these atrocious crimes seeing the UK as a natural refuge. That should not be the case. They should know they will face the full force of the law, whatever the views of the court system in the country from which they've come.
I agree with my honourable friend. Look, we need to send a strong message. I don't like, any more than he does, seeing people in newspapers living freely in this country having had their extradition effectively turned down. And that's why I would like to see in general, and I'm not going to comment on this case, people who are in this country who are potential persecutors of war crimes are persecuted and prosecuted themselves.
Sir Edward Davey.
The Minister is hearing from all sides of the House that we want action. We want this investigation to happen promptly. We all know that he's not in charge of the courts and that the police are independent. But he does have the power to give extra money to the Met War Crimes Unit now, rather than waiting for a request. Will he not do that? Send a signal from this House that we want the police to have the resources to get this investigation done soon.
Minister.
The right honourable gentleman knows full well that if the police require more money for this issue or any other issue, then they come to the Home Office or they have a discussion. Either they internally prioritise or they come to us to see what we can do. We stand ready to do that. And my discussions with the police on this issue is this is not about singularity, about a resource issue. It is about the complexity of the case itself. And some of these cases are incredibly complex, and the untangling of that is one of the challenges and one of the reasons it takes time.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown.
Mr. Speaker, along with my honourable friend, I've actually talked to some of the families who've witnessed some of these dreadful crimes. And can I say to my right honourable friend from the front bench that he, in his meetings with the Metropolitan Police, should urge them to proceed with this proceeding as urgently as possible. 3 to 5 years is too long. If it was a terrorist outrage in this country, the public would be rightly, absolutely outraged it took so long. Can I urge my friend to urge the Metropolitan Police to get on with this? After all, most of the evidence has already been collected by the earlier court cases.
Yes.
My honourable friend may like to reflect that some of the terrorist trials that we are waiting are taking years in the United Kingdom. They take a long time. They are highly complex. Ones that stretch across countries are highly complex, often getting evidence that reaches the evidential bar in order that they can be submitted into court and that they hold the test. And under our system, as under the Rwandan system, the accused has a right of disclosure and defence, and we have to make sure we get that right. But I do hear his urgency. I hear honourable members' urgency. When I meet on Thursday, the head of counter-terrorism policing, I will continue to press that. I will make sure they are aware of the urgency, and we will have a further discussion about whether more resources needed or whether it is a matter of complexity that is taking the time.
Mary Cray.
Mr. Speaker, I too have met survivors of the Rwandan genocide when I visited there in 2006 on a visit to DRC as well. And I know this is a subject that's very close to your heart, Mr. Speaker, so I thank you for granting the urgent question, and I congratulate the Right Honourable Gentleman for Sutton Coldfield for asking it. You will remember 10 years ago when we were joint vice chairs of the all-party group on genocide prevention, closing the impunity gap in the law, sitting in a meeting with Jack Straw to make sure that alleged war criminals could be prosecuted in this country. And people will look at us today and say that our judicial system and our asylum system is supposed to give sanctuary to those fleeing human rights oppressors and atrocities, not being abused by the alleged perpetrators of war crimes. There is no time limit on justice, so can I ask the Minister why the police did not investigate these crimes in parallel with the extradition process, and if he will report to this House on a 6-monthly basis so that we're not here on the 30th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide still demanding justice for those survivors.
First of all, on her last question, Mr. Speaker, look, of course I can update the House on the progress of war crimes investigations in general, and maybe specifically around Rwanda, but not on individual cases. I couldn't come to the House on those one by one, as I've said earlier about commenting on live police investigations. It is obviously a matter for the police about when they start an investigation, but I think it is clear from the chronology of this case that the Rwandan government had requested extradition. We had complied with that. We were keen to see them extradited to face justice in Rwanda. We had safeguards, and we were confident that Rwanda would be able to deliver a fair trial. Regretfully, that was not the view taken by the High Court in 2017, and almost as soon as that decision was made, we took up the baton and started the investigation here. And we will continue with that investigation and hopefully get to a resolution sooner rather than later.
Lawrence Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I visited Rwanda in 2002, I had the misfortune to see some horrific scenes as a result of the genocide, and it was made very clear to me then that part of the reconciliation process had to be justice. Now, indeed, a lot of progress has been made in Rwanda. I visited again last year and saw some of that progress. But will the government continue to work with Rwanda to ensure that it can continue to make the progress, but at the same time recognising that justice is a very, very important part of that recovery process?
Yes, my honourable friend makes a good point, and I think the reason the African minister went to visit was to not only remember the horrors of the genocide and say you are not forgotten, but also to continue to commit Britain's support towards that country and the amazing progress it has made since 1994.
Dame Margaret Hodge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate my right honourable friend member for Sutton Coldfield for raising the issue this morning. I have to say to the Minister that were we talking about people who were allegedly involved in the Nazi Holocaust, there would be a much stronger sense of urgency on action that needed to be taken. And it's in that context that I would say to him that I believe that he is defending the indefensible. There have been 10 years during the extradition proceedings when information, I assume, has been gathered by the authorities. To say that it takes a further 3 to 5 years, or probably closer to 10, to then bring the matter to trial is just unbelievable. Complexity and thoroughness does not justify this level of delay. And I would urge the Minister to listen to what are unanimous voices across the House and do all that in his power. It's not about resources, it's about will. It's about a will to act and actually ensure that the police do pursue this and that these people are brought to justice much more swiftly.
Minister.
Please, look, I hope the right honourable lady does not think, because I have upheld the rule of law about the courts, that there is no urgency. I would like to see these people off our streets. I do not want war criminals walking around this country. I don't want them on a day-to-day basis, and I want them to face justice. And I have very strong views that these people should face justice. But I also know that police investigations are complex, and there is no magic wand we can wave to force these things at a quicker pace than they are. We can offer resource, we can offer to remove any barriers, whether they are international or not. We can go to court, as we did, on behalf of the victims, effectively, and the people of Rwanda, to try and get this dealt with. But I simply can do no more than make sure the police know of the urgency, that I can continue to monitor it and press them on a weekly basis if necessary to make sure we get a resolution. But there is a determination on this side of the House and all sides of the House to bring war criminals to justice, and we will continue to press that.
O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I accept the Minister's good faith in this, and I recognise this country's good record in dealing with its international obligations. And I also welcome the fact that neither he nor I hope anyone else in this House seeks to go behind the decisions of an independent judiciary in this country. But will he recognise it's also important in these cases, in particular, to ensure that so much time does not pass, that the testimony of witnesses does not fade? You're very often dependent upon eyewitness testimony in these cases, and the longer it is since the incident, we all know, those of us who appear in the courts, the harder it is to ensure a fair trial and fair testing of that evidence.
Minister.
My learned friend knows better than anyone else about the judiciary and the relationship with the executive, the judiciary. And look, I absolutely understand the importance of urgency with evidence and making sure that we can produce trials that are successful. And I think that is really important. Look, all I can say, as I've said to many members here, I will press the urgency on the counter-terrorism police when I next see them. I promise to update the House on progress of war crimes prosecutions per se. But I also know, as he does as well, that we have to respect the judiciary, the rule of the judiciary, their rulings. There has been too much bashing of the judiciary in the last 20 years. That does not help our society. They made that decision. We abide by it. We now must prosecute in this country, and we will put all urgency to do that as soon as possible.
Mohammed Yassin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not long after my elections, I met with a constituent who had seen family members brutally killed during the Rwandan genocide. Her story was heartbreaking. It is unbearable for her that one of the alleged perpetrators of these horrific acts of violence now lived in her town. He is free to continue with his family life without fear of extradition. She is asking, when will she see justice for her brothers?
Well, the honourable member would have heard my earlier answers. As the police progress, whatever cases they have, we stand ready to support them in doing so, and subject to the complexities and subject to the courts, I hope that we see prosecution sooner rather than later.
Mark Pawsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Anybody visiting Rwanda will recognise a spirit of reconciliation and a real desire to move on from the absolutely horrific events of 1994. But that's backed up with a sense of justice, often through the specially arranged local courts. The question is, if Rwanda itself has done the right thing, why can't we?
Minister.
Rwanda doing the right thing has been the rule of law, the separation of powers, the respect to the judiciary, and successful prosecutions and fair trials. That is the same principles that we believe in this country. Respecting the judiciary, respecting the rulings of the judiciary is exactly the same thing that we must do if we are to set example around the world. And that is exactly what the Rwandan courts seem to manage as well, and that's why we will respect our judiciary's ruling and we will seek to prosecute in this country.
And Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too have visited Rwanda, although it was with the all-party group on agriculture for food and development. So I saw a far more positive vision of the country, although it's shocking as you go around what is stunning countryside to reflect on the fact that it was once steeped in bloodshed. But can I ask what work and whether the Minister has had conversations with his colleagues in DFID? Because obviously the number of survivors of the genocide is dwindling as the years pass. And I'm thinking particularly of there was something like between 250,000 and 500,000 women who were deliberately targeted with rape, and many were deliberately infected with HIV. If we could work with those survivors, perhaps that would help gather evidence so that we can eventually bring people to justice. Very good.
Minister.
The Honourable Lady makes some really valid suggestions and points. Look, I am obviously not the Foreign Office or the Africa or DFID Minister, but I will write to my colleagues and ask them to write to you and explain what they're doing and seek any suggestions you may have about how to build a better policy going forward.
Mr. Philip Holloway.
These alleged perpetrators of the Rwandan genocide are Rwandan citizens, are they not? And the public in this country will simply view with disbelief that we're not returning them to justice in their own country. And for these people to be at large and in receipt of social security benefits just make the situation even worse. The situation after the Second World War, 25 years on from this horrific event, would be that in 1970, there were alleged Nazi war criminals in this country who this government were refusing to extradite for trial in West Germany, Poland and Israel. That would have been unacceptable, as is this.
Minister.
Perhaps I could correct my honourable friend. This government is not refusing to extradite them. This government sought to extradite them to Rwanda to face justice. The court took a different view that said they did not feel they would face a fair trial if we did, and we have to abide by the court. That's why, instead, we are going to seek to prosecute them here in the United Kingdom, which we think is the best outcome. And whether they are citizens of the United Kingdom or not, whether they're Rwandan citizens or anywhere else, under the European Convention of Human Rights, we have our article obligations, and we must abide by those.
Lillian Greenwood.
Mr. Speaker, in a few weeks' time, I'll join Nottingham's Rwandan community commemorating 25 years since the genocide. Further to the question from my honourable friend for Bedford, does he appreciate the impact on those survivors who've made their home here in the UK if our country isn't seen to be doing everything possible to ensure that those guilty of crimes against humanity are brought to justice?
Minister.
I understand her point. If she could communicate to her Rwandan community that this government spent £3 million in trying to extradite them to go and face justice in Rwanda, then having that not been possible, this country, the police, is investing in trying to make sure we seek justice here in the United Kingdom. That's not passive and doing nothing, that is doing something.
Chris Elmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was privileged to be on the first CPA delegation last November to Rwanda. It truly is a glorious country, and there was a theme across all the meetings that we took part in, be it with the Foreign Minister to Reconciliation Villages or to district mayors, was no one is going to forget the genocide, no one wants to forget it, but what they deserve is justice. And one of the real concerns from the Foreign Minister was what would appear to be our unwillingness to engage and to investigate the allegations against these alleged perpetrators of the genocide. In 18 months' time, the Minister will know that Rwanda is hosting the CHOGM, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. How can we, as a UK Parliament, as a Commonwealth Parliament Association, as the UK Government, sit with the Rwandans in Kigali talking about common purpose around security and safety when it appears we do not take their concerns and their need for reconciliation and justice seriously within the UK system?
Minister.
I dispute the picture you're painting of the government's commitment towards Rwanda and indeed Parliament. I mean, there have been plenty of friends of Rwanda in this whole question standing up, quite rightly, asking questions and caring about the consequences of the genocide in 1994. This government, the last Labour government, this House, is great supporters of the steps that Rwanda has done since 1994. And that's why, we are not doing nothing. We tried to extradite individuals to face trial. The court took a different view, and then we started an investigation. We have also been running other investigations into war crimes and will continue to do so.
Thank you. Order. Urgent question. David Lammy.
If the Minister will make a statement on the Windrush compensation scheme.